used to not believe in coming back, because I didn't even know I had left. I thought anxiety was just something people said when they were nervous about a test or a job interview. I used to think depression meant being sad for a few days, and then shaking it off like rain from your shoulders. But then it happened to me, and nothing about it felt like what I'd imagined. It started small, almost invisible. A few sleepless nights. A strange restlessness in my chest. My heart would pound randomly after coffee, and I'd feel nauseous without a reason. Probably just the caffeine, I told myself. I laughed it off. But then the feeling stayed. It grew. It settled into my body like a shadow I couldn't shake off. Some nights I couldn't sleep at all. I would lie awake with my heart thudding like a warning drum. I'd check my pulse. Google symptoms. Whisper questions into the dark. Is something wrong with me? Am I sick? Am I dying? I went to the doctor. He ran tests and casually mentioned it might be acid reflux. But we should keep an eye on it just in case. There's a small chance of something more serious. He said it like it was nothing, but for me it was everything. That one sentence, something more serious, echoed inside me for days. My mind twisted it into a diagnosis, a sentence, a certainty. Suddenly, every ache in my body became a symptom. Every thought spiraled into panic. I imagined the worst-case scenario 100 times a day. I saw myself in hospital beds. I felt the grief of people losing me before anything had even happened. That's what anxiety does. It tricks your mind into living a future that hasn't happened. It pulls you out of the present and drowns you in what-ifs. I tried to ignore it. I told no one. I thought I was strong enough to handle it myself. But anxiety doesn't care how strong you think you are. It's not something you fight with logic. It's something that grips your chest at 3 a.m. and whispers that the worst is coming. And slowly, I stopped living. I stopped enjoying music, stopped laughing. Food lost its taste. Life lost its color. I was still here, but not really. I was breathing, walking, smiling in photos. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. And when I finally opened up to others, I realized I wasn't alone. One friend told me their anxiety started after just one bad coffee-induced panic attack. Another spiraled after a breakup. Someone else told me they lost a loved one and never felt safe again. The triggers were different. But the feeling, the descent, the darkness, that was the same. So maybe you're here because you're living in that same silence, that same fog. Maybe you're looking for a way out, or just a sign you're not crazy. If so, stay with me, because this is the beginning of my story, not the end. And if I found a way through it, maybe you will too. I remember the exact moment it started. It wasn't during a traumatic event. It wasn't after a loss or a big life change. It was just a cup of coffee. That morning, I hadn't eaten much. I poured myself a strong brew, thinking it would help me feel more alive, energized, ready for the day. But 20 minutes later, I felt my chest tighten. My heart started racing. My hands turned cold. My vision slightly blurred. I thought, what's going on? I wasn't scared at first, just confused. Maybe it was the caffeine. Maybe I drank it too fast. Maybe I was just tired. So I lay down, thinking the feeling would pass, but it didn't. The strange, fluttery sensation in my chest lingered. My breathing became shallow. And then my thoughts started spinning. Am I having a heart attack? Is something seriously wrong with me? I checked my pulse again and again. It was racing. I paced the room. I drank water. I opened the window to get air, but none of it worked. That one cup of coffee had become a trigger, a door. And once I stepped through, I couldn't go back. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I felt even a slight change in my body, a skipped heartbeat, a twinge in my stomach, I'd panic. I stopped drinking coffee. I stopped eating certain foods. I read about every possible heart condition. I memorized symptoms. I stayed up late on medical forums. I became obsessed. You see, anxiety doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it creeps in through small cracks, unnoticed. For me, it disguised itself as curiosity at first, a desire to understand my body. But that curiosity quickly turned into fear. Fear turned into obsession, and obsession turned into a cage. People around me didn't understand. "It's just coffee," they said. "Relax." But how do you explain to someone that your mind doesn't listen to logic anymore? My body would react to nothing. My heart would race for no reason. My hands would go numb. I'd feel lightheaded in the middle of conversations, so I began avoiding everything. Coffee, sugar, spicy food, crowded places, loud environments, even light exercise. I was afraid anything might set me off. My world shrank. I used to enjoy morning walks, coffee shops, spontaneous trips, but now, even stepping outside felt like a risk. I remember sitting in my room one evening, staring at the same glass of water for 10 minutes, too afraid to drink it. My mind whispered, "What if there's something wrong with your throat? What if this water triggers another attack?" I knew it sounded irrational, but knowing didn't help, because fear isn't rational, it's loud, it's persuasive, and once it takes root, it starts to grow in every direction. I began avoiding friends, making excuses. I didn't want anyone to see how fragile I'd become. I was embarrassed, ashamed even. Who gets broken by coffee? I thought. But here's the thing. No one tells you. It's not about the coffee. The coffee was just the spark. The real fire was already there. Hidden, inside me. All it needed was something to ignite it, and once the fire caught, it spread fast. I had panic attacks while brushing my teeth. I'd get dizzy just lying in bed. My body would feel heavy, like I was sinking into the earth. One time I called an ambulance because I was sure I was having a heart attack. They ran tests, checked everything. "You're perfectly healthy," the doctor said. I almost laughed, because in that moment I felt anything but healthy. That's one of the cruelest parts of anxiety. It tricks you into believing that something is terribly wrong. Even when every test says you're fine, you start doubting your own sanity. And the worst part? You look fine on the outside. People see you smiling in pictures, walking around, functioning. But inside you're fighting a war no one can see. It wasn't until much later that I learned this had a name: health anxiety. It's when your body becomes the battlefield, and every sensation becomes a threat, and it often starts just like it did for me, with something small, something no one else would even notice. I've since spoken to others who went through the same thing. Some couldn't sleep for weeks after a panic attack in the middle of the night. Some gave up coffee forever. Some stopped going to work, scared their heart would give out at their desk. Different stories, same fear. You see, the moment you no longer feel safe inside your own body, the whole world becomes dangerous, and that's what anxiety really is. Not just fear, but the loss of safety. Not from others, but from yourself. That's what the coffee took from me. Not health, not energy, but the quiet, unconscious trust I used to have in my own body. It would take me a long time to rebuild that trust. But before I could rebuild, I had to fall even deeper, because the coffee was only the beginning. If the coffee broke my trust in my body, then the doctor's words shattered what was left of my peace of mind. It started with a simple visit, a checkup, because I couldn't shake the discomfort in my chest and stomach. I was hoping for reassurance, maybe a prescription, something that would tell me you're okay. But instead the doctor said this: "It's likely acid reflux, probably nothing serious. But let's keep an eye on it, just to be safe. There's a small chance it could develop into something more, like Barrett's esophagus, in rare cases, and even cancer." He said it casually, like he was reading from a brochure. But my mind didn't hear small chance. My mind heard cancer. And just like that, a single seed of fear was planted. That night, I couldn't sleep. My stomach churned with a fire that felt far too real. I kept thinking, is this what it feels like before it's too late? I Googled symptoms until 3 a.m. Acid reflux, esophageal cancer, silent killers. I read blogs, forums, survivor stories. Some comforted me, others terrified me. But the more I read, the more I feared. I convinced myself I had something fatal, something the doctor had missed, something hiding inside me, waiting. And so began the next phase of my anxiety. Health obsession. Every day I monitored my body like a scientist. I wrote down symptoms. I checked the color of my tongue, my skin, my eyes. I'd gently press my abdomen for pain, check my throat in the mirror. But it didn't stop there. I began to imagine future scenarios. Me lying in a hospital bed. My family crying around me. The doctor delivering news I already knew was coming. Was all in my head, but it felt real. And when you live long enough in fear of the future, the present starts to disappear. I stopped laughing. I stopped looking forward to anything. Birthdays, holidays, even weekends meant nothing. Because in my mind, they might be my last. My life became one long goodbye I wasn't ready to say. The worst part? The tests all came back normal. Every scan, every scope, every blood draw, they all said I was fine. But I couldn't believe it. I didn't trust it. I thought, maybe they missed something. Maybe it's too early to detect. Maybe I'm a rare case. Anxiety makes you doubt even the truth. It turns certainty into suspicion. Eventually, I started avoiding the doctor altogether. Not because I was better, but because I was afraid of what I might hear. I was afraid of confirmation. That's the trap of health anxiety. You want to know the truth, but only if it's good news. And when you fear the worst, even silence feels like a diagnosis. I remember a friend asking me, "But don't you feel relieved when the tests come back clean?" I shook my head. Not relieved, just confused. Like I'm living in a nightmare no one else can see. That confusion is isolating. You don't want to talk about it because it sounds irrational, embarrassing, so you stay silent. You keep smiling. But inside, you're bracing for something that never arrives. It wasn't until months later that I finally broke down. I was alone. Again. My chest was tight. My breathing shallow. I was lying in bed, drenched in sweat, convinced. This was it. This time it's real, I thought. This time it's happening. I didn't call an ambulance. I didn't tell anyone. I just sat there crying. Not because I was dying, but because I was so tired of feeling like I was. I had wasted so many days fearing a death that never came, that I forgot how to live. And that was the illness I really had, not cancer, not a tumor, but a mind convinced I was always moments away from disaster. The thing about anxiety is that it never needs proof. It just needs doubt. And once doubt takes over, you can be in perfect health and still feel like your body is betraying you. It took time for me to realize that my thoughts were the source of my suffering. Not my stomach, not my heart, not some silent disease. But back then I wasn't ready to accept that, because part of me still believed something terrible was waiting in the shadows. And so I stayed in that cycle. Doctor visits, online searches, sleepless nights, and invisible grief. Grief for a life I hadn't lost, but grief nonetheless. There are losses that scream, and then there are losses that whisper. I didn't break the day things fell apart. I didn't cry or collapse or scream into a pillow. I just went quiet. That's how it felt when someone I loved was suddenly gone. Not gone in the sense of death, though that pain I've known too, but gone from my world, from my daily rhythm, from my future. One day they were everything, and the next, they were a ghost in my memories. I kept waiting for the sadness to crash over me like a wave, but it never did. Instead, it soaked into me, quietly, slowly, until I couldn't feel anything at all. I stopped laughing. I stopped singing in the shower. I stopped making plans, and that's the strange thing about depression. It doesn't always arrive with a breakdown. Sometimes it comes in silence. People around me didn't notice at first. I still went to work, still replied to messages, still posted the occasional smile on social media, but I was fading. Not dramatically, not visibly, just gently. I remember sitting at dinner with friends, nodding along, pretending to care. I heard the laughter, the jokes, the stories, but inside, it felt like I was behind a glass wall, watching life happen from the outside. I wasn't living, I was performing, and it wasn't because I wanted attention. I didn't want anyone to worry. In fact, I wanted to disappear as quietly as possible. That's what grief does when it lingers too long. It becomes not just sadness, but a kind of spiritual erosion. It wears away at your joy, your curiosity, your spark, until everything feels heavy, pointless. I started asking questions I never had before. What's the point? Why bother? Does any of this even matter? I'd wake up, look at the ceiling, and feel nothing. No motivation, no fear, no excitement. Just blankness, and that's scarier than panic because at least with panic you feel something. Depression is different. It's not the presence of pain, it's the absence of everything else. Music I once loved became noise. Food I once craved became tasteless. People I cared about became distant, even when they were right next to me. One morning I stared at the mirror for a full 5 minutes and thought, who is that? I couldn't recognize the person I was becoming. I wasn't angry. I wasn't crying. I was just gone. And what made it worse was knowing that nothing dramatic had happened. There was no car crash, no funeral, no tragic headline, just loss. Quiet, invisible loss. The kind that doesn't make people send flowers. The kind no one talks about. A friend moving away. A breakup that ended politely. A parent who grew distant. The world doesn't grieve those things with you. So you start to think maybe you're the problem. Maybe you're too sensitive, too weak, too dramatic. But you're not. Because grief isn't about how big the loss was. It's about how deeply it rooted itself in you. And mine had taken root in the quiet parts of me. I remember walking through the grocery store one day, trying to remember what I came to buy. The lights felt too bright, the aisles too long. I stood there, frozen, staring at shelves of cereal like they were ancient symbols I couldn't decode. Why am I like this? I whispered under my breath. No one answered. That's the thing with lingering grief. You don't scream for help because you don't even know what kind of help you need. And even if someone asked, "Are you okay?" I wouldn't have known how to respond, so I just kept existing, day after day, going through motions, smile, work, reply, sleep, repeat. Inside, I felt like a house abandoned in the middle of a storm, the lights still flickering, the walls still standing, but no one home. I didn't even realize how far gone I was until someone close to me said, "You don't laugh like you used to." That's what finally broke me. Not the sadness, but the realization that even others could sense the hollow space where joy used to live. I wish I could say that moment changed everything, that I woke up the next day and felt brand new. But healing doesn't work like that. Grief isn't a storm that passes. Sometimes it becomes a season, and the only way out is through. I didn't know it yet, but I had begun the slow, quiet journey of reclaiming myself, not with grand gestures, but with tiny steps, a walk around the block, a call to an old friend, a favorite song played late at night, and slowly, very slowly, the numbness began to lift. Not completely, not forever, but just enough to feel like maybe, someday I could come back. And maybe that's what hope really is, not certainty, but the faint whisper that something better might still be possible. I can't tell you how many times I heard those words. They came from friends, family, even doctors. Always said with good intentions, always said with a smile. But every time I heard them, I felt smaller. Because what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was the storm happening inside me. That's the thing about mental suffering, it's invisible. And when people can't see your pain, they assume it isn't real. You're probably just overthinking it. You need to be more positive. Everyone gets stressed. So I started to shut down. I stopped explaining how I felt. Stopped trying to make people understand. It wasn't worth the blank stares or the forced pep talks. Instead, I became an expert in pretending, smiling in public, falling apart in private. I went to work with a calm face, then cried in the bathroom on my lunch break. I laughed at dinner, then laid awake for hours staring at the ceiling, unable to breathe from the weight of it all. I was surrounded by people, but lonelier than I had ever been. That's the cruelty of silent suffering. It tricks you into believing that no one could ever truly understand, so you stay quiet, and the silence becomes unbearable. I remember one moment vividly. I was at a birthday party, surrounded by laughter, clinking glasses, music, stories. I stood there smiling, nodding, holding a drink I couldn't even taste. And I thought, if I disappeared right now, would anyone notice? Not in a dramatic, attention-seeking way, just in a quiet, numb, exhausted way. That night, I walked home in the rain, not caring if I got soaked. Not caring about anything. I was done pretending, but I didn't know how to be real either. Because when you've worn the mask for so long, taking it off feels like standing naked in the cold. And even when I did try to be honest, the reactions were disheartening. But you have so much going for you. You're strong, you'll get through it. Just focus on the positives. I wanted to scream, I know you mean well. But I don't need a motivational poster. I need someone to sit with me in the dark. But no one ever did. Not really. And so I began to believe what my mind was already whispering. You're too much. You're broken. You're a burden. Withdrew. I stopped reaching out. I let messages go unanswered. I canceled plans with vague excuses. And no one pushed back. No one showed up anyway. That hurt more than the loneliness itself, because it confirmed what I feared, that maybe I wasn't worth showing up for. Looking back now, I realize most people simply didn't know what to do. They weren't heartless, just unequipped. Mental pain doesn't come with a visible wound, it doesn't bleed, it doesn't bruise, so people assume it isn't real. But it is real. It's the heaviest thing I've ever carried. It sits in your chest like wet cement. It follows you into every room. It makes simple things, answering an email, taking a shower, getting dressed, feel like climbing a mountain with broken legs. And the worst part? You feel guilty for not being better. Guilty for canceling. Guilty for being distant.
Guilty for not having a clear reason why, so you punish yourself in silence. And the silence grows. There were days when I stared at my phone wanting so badly to text someone, I'm not okay. But then I'd freeze. What would they say? What
if they didn't care? What if I made things awkward, so I put the phone down and sat in the dark? Again. That's the paradox of depression. It makes you crave connection and fear it at the same time. It makes you long for someone to notice, while convincing you that if they did, they'd walk away. Eventually, I began to write instead. I kept a private journal where I poured out everything I couldn't say aloud. The pages became my only friend, the one place I could be raw, angry, afraid, and in that quiet space, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Honesty. Not healing. Not yet. But honesty. I wasn't okay. I was tired. I felt alone. I didn't want to die, but I didn't know how to keep living like this either. Writing those words was terrifying, but also freeing, because naming the darkness is the first step toward not being consumed by it. And in that journal, I began to trace the outlines of a thought I hadn't dared to fully believe. Maybe I didn't need to fix everything. Maybe I just needed someone to listen, and if no one else could be that person, maybe I could be that person for myself. That small shift, that quiet act of self-compassion didn't solve everything, but it cracked open a door I would later walk through, step by trembling step, toward something I hadn't felt in years. Home, not a place, not a person, but a feeling, a sense that I might still belong in this world, and that even in my silence, I still mattered. Maybe your story isn't exactly like mine. Maybe your anxiety didn't begin with a cup of coffee. Maybe you never got lost in health fears or grief that carved out your insides. But maybe, just maybe, you've felt the same silence, that heavy, invisible weight, the numb mornings, the endless pretending, the ache of feeling like a ghost inside your own life. If you have, then you're not alone. And I need you to know this. You are not broken. What you're feeling, this darkness, this fear, this exhaustion, it's not weakness. It's not failure. It's your nervous system crying for help. It's your soul begging for rest, and healing doesn't begin with fixing everything at once. It begins with believing that healing is even possible. That's what changed for me. Not a miracle. Not a dramatic moment. Just a quiet shift. One day, I stopped asking, how do I make this all go away? And I started asking, how can I be kinder to myself today? Some days, the answer was, go outside for 5 minutes. Some days it was, say no to things that drain you. And some days it was simply, survive. That's it. Just survive the day. And over time, the days started to feel different. Not perfect, not magical, but real, grounded, manageable. Found moments of stillness that didn't terrify me. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in months. I let people see parts of me I'd kept hidden, and slowly the fear began to loosen its grip. Don't get me wrong, I still have days where the darkness creeps in. I still get scared. I still overthink. I still have moments where I feel like I'm slipping back. But now I know what to do with those feelings. I greet them, I sit with them. I remind myself this is not forever. That phrase has become my lifeline because no feeling, no matter how intense, lasts forever, and neither will yours. So if you're in it right now, if you're drowning in fear, or lost in numbness, or silently screaming behind a smile, stay with me. This isn't the end of your story. This is just the part where things begin to shift. Quietly. Softly. The world may not notice yet, but you will. And maybe that's enough for now. Thank you for walking through these shadows with me, for listening, for staying, because in the next chapter I'll show you the first real steps I took to come back. Not theories, not vague advice, but the exact things I did, tiny, simple, life-saving things that pulled me out of the fog and back into the world. If you're ready, I'll walk that path with you, so stay close. The next part is coming, and it just might be the beginning of your return too.